Feeling the need for change is at the heart of your ability to make it happen. Welcome to Turning Inward. I'm Vivian Carrasco, your midwife, teacher, and host for this podcast. Together, you and I are going to navigate the interior life. And we're going to do that by unearthing our personal truths, our own insight, and our inner knowing. These are weekly teachings that are brought to you by hard-nosed scientific evidence, focused on spiritual direction with integrity and self-awareness. In 2 words, this is your inner work. Morning.
How are you doing?
I'm good. So, Mike, I'm so excited to hear about your story.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity.
You're so very welcome. So tell me how you turned inward, or you said, I think you said, jumped out of the box or thought out of the box. And I thought to myself when I read that, do we still have boxes? So tell me more.
In my case, I was about probably close to 30 years old, and I just ran across this little book on stress, a talk or something I was interested in. I'd read it in a magazine. I thought, well, this kind of looks interesting, and I don't really have any stress, but it might be interesting to learn about stress. It turned out it was a little kind of meditation observation technique by a guy named Roy Masters, who's, I think, close to 100 years old now. And it was just a little simple thing where you sit and you observe your thoughts, you close your eyes, and you kind of observe the thought stream in your head and kind of like look at the back of your forehead like a movie screen. And you think about your fingers, and you just feel your fingers tingle by bringing your attention or your awareness to your fingers. And, well, I'd never seen anything like this. It was kind of interesting. And first time I tried it, I couldn't do it at all. I just could make my fingers tingle, and I just thought, well, I'm not good at this at all. And then I tried it again a day or two later, and I just got this brief moment of real clarity about a situation in my life. And it was just like, boom, the light turned on. I was in love with this girl, and we were going out some, but it was not really working quite right. And I was probably driving her nuts. I don't know, these things, but whatever.
Maybe. I had a hunch.
Yeah, I mean, but I did care about her, and I really was trying to figure it out, and she was quite gracious with me through the whole process. Anyway, I got this clarity that you just need to give her space, just separate and just give her space, and you're not dealing with her right. And I just got that as an instant clarity. And it was like night and day. It wasn't like, well, I'm not sure. It was just like, no, it was so clear that I did that. And it was like pretty profound. And so that started me on kind of the path of learning to do that more and more, and just really starting to understand it. I actually went to 1 or 2 of Roy's seminars, which were quite fascinating. And it was interesting. One of the things I noticed at the time was, like, this guy came to my door one time who was selling something. And you can kind of learn to detach, like you're just watching somebody on television when they're angry at you or when they're trying to emotionally get you wound up or pitch you something. And I'm looking at this guy, and he's giving me this pitch, and I'm kind of like just very consciously detached from it. It was almost funny. It's like this clown making all these movements, and his mouth's moving, and I guess he was saying stuff, and I just let it go in one ear and out the other. And it was really funny how it just kind of sucked his energy out of him because I wasn't responding to it. I was just kind of watching it, and it was like I was very conscious of that's what I was doing. And I found I could do that I've diffused people that were angry, and it really helped me. And so that was really my first awareness of, I guess, a deeper level of consciousness or awareness. And I'm sure I probably had glimpses of it before, but that was the first time that I really very clear that, well, there's a whole nother level of living and the thing is, we never know, right? We don't know that until we are out of it. Like, wow, I really was stressed out, or wow, there's a clarity here that I had no idea was there before. And so that really started me off, and that helped me for a long time, but still, we always think we found it, and then we always find something else. Life is a continual process as long as we can stay with it.
So tell me a little bit about how you're better, and what does it mean when you said I became more aware?
Well, I guess it was, I started seeing how I was just reacting to things. And when I learned it, it's kind of like when you go on a fast, a raw food diet, and your head clears out and you realize, wow, I had no idea I've been in such a fog. Mm-hmm. So it's more like you almost didn't know this level of existence was possible. And a lot of that comes from the belief that goals will lead us to happiness. If I can do this, I will be happy. If I can get this girl to love me, or if I can make this money or get this job or move to this area, then I'll be happy. We tend to live in that sort of thing. And so we're constantly thinking we're not there yet and that we have to get somewhere and do something to get there. Now, while there's a sense that we do have to do something, we can't just do nothing and get to where we need to be. That's a complete misunderstanding of what goals are. And that's what I've learned more recently, is that goals should serve goodness, serve happiness. They don't lead to happiness. Goals are how our brain works. Our mind is a goal-achieving mechanism. Mm-hmm. But it's not conscious. We're not our mind. We're not our body. We are something different than that. So our brain and our mind serve us by pursuing goals, but they also pursue goals mostly that we're not conscious of. And these conscious goals weigh us down. It's kind of like when your computer starts running slow and you open the little task manager thing and you got all these things running on it, or your phone or whatever.
Of death.
Yeah. So you got all these little things, like, what are all these things running? And they're using like 98% of my processor and my memory. And so we've got all these goals that don't serve us. And as I started to really understand how goals work and how the brain works, it's helped me to gain more clarity about, oh, I've got a goal for this. I've got a goal that's not serving me. For instance, we have goals for people to like us, or goals to be smart. No, I know that.
But they're unconscious. So our brain is working towards that goal, but we're not consciously moving. We don't consciously move in that direction, is what I hear you saying.
Exactly. Our consciousness acts like a flashlight that should be examining. It should be the master of our brain. It should direct our brain, because our brain or our mind just works on goals. And we have to actually consciously train our mind on how to work with goals and which goals. And that's what's really powerful. As we start to see these goals that don't serve us and start to gain clarity, these goals just start to dissolve and free up the mind space. So it's like, again, creating more clarity, which then allows us to have more ease about what we're doing, less stress about things, less attempt to force things to happen or to make things happen, and to let our natural... It's amazing what power we have and what we have inside, but we're constricting it by trying to channel it or trying to hold it back, when a lot of times I think our negativity or things that are holding us back are really positives that we just have framed in the wrong way, or have these goals that we think are good, but they're actually just nonsensical or contradictory. Because we want to be people to like us, but they don't really know who we are. Because we're not our body, we're not our thought or what we say, but that's what people like us based on, right? Because they see us as this body and this personality. And they have a very cartoonish glimpse of us because they get very limited exposure to us. And we're the same way. That's just part of the nature of being a human being. Women, I guess stereotypically, like probably truthfully, they won't like me if I don't look a certain way. Or guys, she won't like me if I'm come across this way, or whatever. But most of those things are not really the you, they're the externals. So first of all, learning who we really are, then the goal of having people like us, because who I am is not who they think. It's a perception based on what they see. And so I can just understand that they have a very limited and poor understanding of me, really don't understand me much at all. So if they don't like me, then I don't have to worry about it, because it's not really me they're not liking, right? If that makes sense. They're liking kind of a fiction or a perception in their own mind, or not liking it. So it's these sort of things have helped me to even get more clarity about because it's kind of feedback. When I start to feel bad, the feeling is associated with a goal in my mind. It associates with a feeling that might make me feel bad. And it's easy to buy into that. Well, I'm not happy. I feel bad. And things aren't good. But then I can realize, no, that feeling just is my brain's association with a certain goal that it's going after that's not helpful. Well, it's kind of like hurting my finger. I know I should look at that finger and see if I need to put a bandage on it or dress it. Maybe I cut it or something. That bad feeling should be telling me to examine what my goals are.
That's a beautiful description of it. And so what I hear you saying is it's less of self-identifying. I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever the enough is, or if when that you mentioned earlier. And instead, this is a beacon that's drawing my attention somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. And it's that clarity that really kind of building, and again, that we get there from building up from what we truly know and then move from there. So the first stage is, who am I? Who are you? And basically, the one thing we can know is that we are conscious, right? I'm conscious of you. We're hearing each other's voices. I can see the trees outside. I have thoughts. I have feelings. I'm conscious of something. I'm not conscious of nothing. I'm not unconscious. And I'm not conscious of everything. So, but I can know for sure I am conscious of some things. And so everything that I'm conscious of in any given moment is my field of consciousness, or a consciousness field, or I guess a field's the best way to put it. And so who am I then? I'm what's aware of my consciousness field.
And I heard that the level of awareness we have, like that is conscious to us, is 0.0045 of what is actually there. So that was profound for me, because I thought in my mind that I am a fairly aware person. But when I looked at that, even if I'm above average and maybe at 1%, that's still 99% of what's happening beyond my awareness.
Yeah. I guess that goes with, as they say, what we're aware of, about 7 bits of information at any one given time, and there's millions of things going on that our unconscious is doing, our so-called unconscious mind, which is running our heartbeat, our body regulation, all these different things. And so it really is fascinating, is why are we made this way? Is there something wrong with us? And really, no, it's just, this is actually a survival mechanism. Like your car has a default way of operating. You push the gas pedal, it will go. You consciously have to steer, brake, accelerate. But once you get it moving, it will just go on its own.
That's a beautiful analogy. And moving from our default state is when we begin to lead ourselves, make choices, and like you said, get to know who we really are.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a whole realm. And again, I learned this from a guy named David Mills. I don't claim originality with it, but the beautiful thing about it is it's all based on abundance. And it's all about looking for, our first goal should always be, how do we know what's true? How do we know it? Not, did I learn it from my professor told me, or my mother told me, or my preacher, or my rabbi, or whoever told me? How can I know what's true and not believe that something's true? Because it makes no sense to believe something is true.
Give me an example for our listeners.
Okay. Well, a lot of us will say, I believe in God because I read the Bible or whatever. That's a big one, right? Or we hear that people give that as a justification. Well, the Bible says God exists. Well, where'd the Bible come from? Well, God made the Bible. So it's kind of this circular argument, right? But it's okay. We can believe it's true that God exists, but it doesn't really make sense to believe something's true. We either know something's true or we don't know it's true. We can believe as if it were true so that we kind of act upon it in a way that, okay, I act as if this is true, because that's really what we do. And so in the case of God, we can actually build up an understanding of who we call God. Now, people might not like that term. Some people don't shy away from it. They might say the universe or whatever. But the the nature of God that we would consider an all-powerful, conscious being of love and goodness, we can actually build that up from the ground up, that has to be the case, that he exists, he or she, again, not a gender, but it exists, and we can prove that to ourselves, so we don't have to just believe it is true. We can know that it's true. And so in that case, that's a very powerful thing, because if we know that's true and we know the basic nature of this entity or being, then that changes a whole lot of things. And it gives us a whole different perspective on the world and on life and on how we treat each other. Because we can know, for example, that God feels everything that we do to someone and everything that someone does to us. So as the scripture says, as you've done unto the least of these, you've done unto me, right? So God actually feels when we hurt someone, God feels that hurt. And so when we know that, then that gives us even greater pause to, wow, if I'm hurting this person, I'm also hurting God.
And hurting ourselves. Yeah.
Yes.
Now give me something that has shifted for you from a belief state to a knowing state. Something that you've been able to sort of drill down into what's true. Well, the thing about God is one. I mean, I've always pretty much believed it, really not had doubts about it, but with just clarity that pretty much it has to be this way. There is no question anymore that nothing could work without God is one really powerful example. And the basis of that is really understanding the nature of reality and perception, because when we look out and we both see this, say there's a tree, if we're both sitting on the back porch together and we see a tree, right? Well, we both see it, so it's not in our head. But we also know that the green leaves on that tree are not in themselves green. That green is related to our perception of the frequencies, the light bouncing off of them, and so on, the way our brain processes, our eyes process color. If we go and touch that tree, it might feel rough or hard or cool or whatever. That's not an innate property of that tree alone. That's a property of our interface with that object by touching it, which requires us and the object. So there's something out there, but it's not exactly what we think it is or we see it as. And so that was the hardest part, when I really had to work through that and get around the habit of just thinking, well, it's a tree. And it's okay to act as if it's a tree in most cases, that we don't run into it and we can cut down the dead limbs and all that, just like Newtonian physics works for most things, but we know it's actually not accurate at a certain level. And so it's just starting from that foundation. And once you kind of break things down to how they really are, then it's how they have to work pretty much becomes clear. Now, for someone who's maybe where you were in the beginning stages in your 30s, and they're ready to take the training wheels off of their social self. You know, you mentioned your book by Roy Masters. What would you suggest, or what kind of insight would you give someone at that stage? Just for life, you mean? Just in general, for stepping? They're noticing. It's almost like just below that level of awareness. When you said, I don't have stress, but looks like an interesting book. You weren't consciously drawing yourself there, but maybe subconsciously your essential self, your deeper knowing, where that clarity comes from, was saying, Mike, we've really got to work on this. Mm-hmm. So what would you offer someone who's there? Who's like, I don't know. I'm fine. Everything's cool. Cake is good. Beer's nice. View looks great. Well, I think in most cases, and there's a great quote by Kierkegaard, the philosopher I love, a wonderful writer, and I'm not a big reader of philosophy, but I just have always been attracted to him. And he says, for every man that comes to the truth through the idea, there's 10,000 that do it because of the skirt. I hadn't heard that one. Yeah, he was a lifelong bachelor, but it was a great saying. Oh, that is a beautiful, and that draws me back to, I think, a point. There's a very popular book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And what I don't see a lot of people talking about is that Napoleon Hill says the same thing. You don't realize it, but you're as a man doing this either for your mother or for your beloved.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard recently teachers and mentors of mine say women are here to sort of mentor and love our men to freedom. So that's a very good point that I want to go into. So what does that quote mean for you?
Well, I think in most cases, like you say, we are not going to do something until we suffer. Just like our finger hurts when we look at it. Oh, I cut my finger on a piece of paper or something. We go put a Band-Aid on it or put some peroxide on it or whatever. Usually that point of pain where something that we want and we can't get it, and we start to realize, to me, that's kind of the magic of it is, all right, there's what really love is. I think what M. Scott Peck said this in one of his books, is that when you reach beyond what you would normally do because of someone else, that you would actually, you go out on a limb, or you're willing to push yourself and grow because of someone else. I'm not saying it too well, I don't think. But I think it's that situation. In my case, I think a lot of it was driven by this,
skirt.
Skirt, yeah. I mean, as I look back on it, I used to say, and we remain good friends, which is another beautiful, there's been a lot of beautiful aspects to the story because of the way it handled it. I was able to, and because she is a terrific lady. I mean, it's just, we've stayed friends for years through that. And it's been very lovely just to have that close friendship in my life. And but because it also helped me to see that I got something different. I thought that I just wanted to be with her, but what I realized is, no, God she provided something. She was kind of the impetus for me to do this. And again, probably not even consciously, but as you say, women are what drive us. We're complementary. Men and women are meant to work together. And in fact, what Roy Masters says, which comes across as pretty outrageous at first until you really understand, but he says that Jesus came to save men from women. And people go, whoa, whoa.
Interesting.
But what he means is that men misuse women, and his example is the Garden of Eden, that if you take even further back, let's say you're a young kid, and little boys tend to do this more than little girls, but you're out with your buddies, and you go down the street, and you throw rocks, and you break the neighbor's window. And if you're raised with a good family where you know right from wrong, and this is really not something you should do, and you come back to your parents, and you can either say, I was with Jimmy and Bobby, and we broke the Smith's windows, and then you take your medicine and you confess, in a sense. Well, your relationship with your family is restored. But if you keep that as a secret from them, there's a barrier that builds up. But you feel okay with Jimmy and Bobby because they're in the crime with you. But you feel a sense of guilt and shame around your parents. So when Adam and Eve, and again, allegorically, however you want to put it, but they sinned in the garden, or they disobeyed what God had told them not to do, they felt guilty in front of God instead of just owning up and saying, God, we violated it. Coming to him, he came to them and said, well, what have you done here? You haven't eaten that tree, have you? But so Adam, who's meant to look to God for his source of enlightenment and source of purpose, instead looks to the woman to fill that role because he feels guilty before God. And this starts the cycle of misuse that scriptures would call sin or missing the mark, however you want to put it. But it is treating people badly and treating each other, manipulating, all the things that we do as human beings. This starts the cycle of how men and women tend to misuse each other and create these drama and these problems and stuff. And so I thought, in other words, he was saying that Jesus came to set the relationship back in order. Mm-hmm. And the other thing he would say that was really pretty funny, again, is he would say, Freud and other people have always asked, what do women want? That's what men always ask, and we don't know. And he said, well, a woman wants what she can't have, and what she can't have is a man whose heart first belongs to God.
Ah, that's beautiful.
It is, yeah. He's a very funny guy. I mean, his wife is kind of a tough lady from Alabama. I mean, he's an Jewish guy from England who kind of has his own version of Christian that he's grown into, which is very interesting, very non-doctrinal and structured, but he's very direct. He just says, he talks about her all the time. He says, well, she still doesn't get it. I've been with her 50 years. She doesn't get it. And she gives it back. But I was out there one time and they were having a wedding, and he was officiating this wedding, and his wife's standing next to him, and he gives a toast, and he goes, well, Socrates said about marriage, if you get a good wife, then life is good. If you don't, you become a philosopher.
Well, that draws me back to what you said about our default state. And even in this example, this line of thought that we've gone down, it reminds me of what you said earlier. You know, we initially think that if we get this, then, or when we do this, we'll. So there's no then there. There's no other, because we are whole now. Yeah,
that's a good way to look at it. I mean, what we're looking for is that the world is actually designed for good. And this is another great way to look at it, because what's the big problem most people have about, well, if there's a God, why is there suffering? Why did my friend die, or my mother die, or why is this person? And that's an important question. But if you look at the fact that if we were all just blissful, God could have made us kind of this blissful Garden of Eden state, that we're just happy, never a care, just running around, petting the animals and picking the fruit and doing whatever. Well, that'd be great, right? We'd love that. But in a sense, it would be a limited amount of goodness and happiness, because we wouldn't really care about anybody. Why would I need to care about you? You got everything you need. I don't need to be concerned with you at all. I can enjoy you, maybe that you're a nice person and we like to run around and chase turtles or whatever, but I couldn't be sacrificial and develop a deep love that would, in the sense, because the reason we have this suffering is, one, is we do have free will, and also because there's greater potential for good, because we can now love, we can now care about people, we can now do all these things that takes. So in a sense, the fall from the Garden of Eden was actually not a fall as much as it was a move forward. And we can kind of look at that in life as kind of the same model. It gives us the ability to love someone now. And when we really understand that this life is a brief blip, right, in terms of eternity, then even the worst suffering is short and temporal, even though it's not to make light of people, because people do greatly suffer. Mm-hmm. And our goal should be to eliminate that and spread goodness, mm-hmm. and not be satisfied with any suffering in the world. But it's a beautiful understanding, because what it really shows us is that our goal should be to maximize goodness and happiness. And we don't have to settle for just making things better. We can actually transform the whole world. It starts with us and how we see things and how we act. It's not about getting a group together and protesting something. It's just, starts with me. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me, like the old song says. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way it can work, because if it's just like running a multi-level marketing, if you just get two people and they get two people, it's like, well, that never works, right? If goodness and happiness in the world relies on the multi-level marketing model, we're never going to get there. But if it just revolves around me getting the clarity, because one person can change the world. Mm-hmm. We know that. So it really is powerful to start to gain clarity that we don't have to settle for anything less than absolute goodness and happiness, and that the world is actually designed for us to get there, and that we go through this. The whole process is to learn and is to grow and is to be way beyond what we think we can be.
Amen. And amen translates into I believe that too. So Mike, tell us where we can find more of you.
Well, my main website is just called breakthroughfactory.com. That's breakthroughfactory.com. And it's kind of based on the breakthrough process that I've talked about here. I use a lot of this understanding in building a program and working with people. So that's why I call it that. It's a way we can actually create results like a factory through a methodology of breakthrough understanding.
If you want more help moving forward and breaking out of a negative mental pattern, I personally host an online community of practice for smart, successful women and a few super cool dudes that gives you more support, tailored training, and an unlimited professional coaching. Visit my digital home at viviancarrasco.com to learn more.